In December 2017, the US Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. unveiled an exhibition called Syria, Please Don't Forget Us. 5 tattered pieces of fabric covered with the names of 82 Syrian prisoners written in blood and rust were the centerpiece of the exhibition. The activist Mansour Omari, who had risked his life to smuggle the pieces of cloth out of a high-security Syrian prison, loaned them to the museum.
I believe, and I'm sure one day, those documentations will be useful to get justice to Syrians in courts and maybe later in local courts in Syria. And it's very important for other people who were not involved in anything to have the information, maybe to find the bodies of their loved ones, maybe to have graves for them so they can visit.
The minute Mansour came to us with these cloths with the names, we immediately at the Holocaust Museum understood the power of this. Because over and over again, you would hear survivors of the Holocaust say, "Remember me, don't forget me, tell my story." The Nazis wanted to obliterate the individuality of its victims. They wanted to make it a mass statistic that would easily be forgotten. But by bringing out those names, we restore to them a bit of the dignity and individuality that the Assad regime tried to take away from them.
I'm Maziar Bahari, an Iranian filmmaker living in exile. I'm ashamed that the government of my country has been one of the main enablers of Bashar al-Assad's regime and has bankrolled the killing of more than 500,000 men, women, and children since the start of the uprising in Syria in 2011. 5 million have become refugees, 6 million have been forced out of their homes, and tens of thousands have disappeared. Mansour survived disappearance. Now he's a witness. I first met Mansour on the Amalfi Coast in southern Italy, where he was writing his memoir. The book starts with the Syrian uprising in January of 2011. The protests were inspired by demonstrations in Tunisia and Egypt around the same time.
The courage was always there in the hearts of Syrian people. But what they were missing is not the courage. They were missing the hope that if I sacrificed my life or did anything, I can change or not. But when we saw what's going on in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Libya, we got this kind of hope that, okay, there could be a result. So I was convinced that we should do something. I cannot look at history changing in Syria and I just stand by and just look at it.
As the protests spread all over Syria, Mansour worked at the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression in Damascus, documenting arrests and detentions.
In 2012, before I was arrested, in one town, which is called Da'al, I documented 4,000 people were detained. And this is almost like 10% of the whole population of this town. And that was only in 2012. The killing that started in demonstrations, it was in 18th of March, 2011, of course, and it was in Daraa when a demonstration went out, and it was a huge demonstration.
Soon, violence engulfed Syria. As the regime killed more people, the number of protesters increased every day, and in turn, the regime became even more brutal.
Normally, when dictatorship regimes suppress people, people get scared and go to their homes or stop doing anything. But in this case, in the Syrian case, the more the regime commits atrocities, the more people are going out.
Within a year after the start of the uprising, the Syrian Center reported that the Assad regime had arrested and detained thousands of people. The center's reports were published by media outlets around the world. On February 16, 2012, officers from Air Force Intelligence Directorate, the most powerful intelligence organization in Syria, raided the office of the center and arrested Mansour and 13 of his colleagues. Mansour's arrest marked the beginning of 356 days of beatings, torture, and humiliation. After spending more than a month in a detention center, he was taken to an underground cell in the notorious 4th Division prison.
We were beaten twice a day. The rule was they came in twice each day and beat us. The beatings included they carried wooden sticks and green pipes of water pipes and electric tasers. The tasers they used to
give you electric shock.
Yeah, to shock people. And of course, their fists, their legs, like kicking us any way possible that they can hurt us, they do it.
Humiliating prisoners by forcing them to imitate animals is a routine psychological torture in Syria. One day, the prison guards forced the prisoner to howl like a dog.
And he tries his best because he's being beaten. Tries his best to be a real dog. While doing so, he was also saying, please, I have nothing to do. I didn't demonstrate. I never went out to streets. I am newly married. I'm still in my honeymoon. That's what he said. So when they heard this, they took it and they started using it. They said to him, you are newly married. We want you to imitate the sound of your wife while she is having orgasm. And this, of course, this in all societies, and especially in this society, is like untouchable thing. You cannot, this is a matter of honor for men, in everywhere, I'm sure. So at the end, he did it. He just uttered a few sounds, and he did it. And when he did it, they start laughing. And they said to him, you don't have honor. You are imitating your wife. And they start abusing him more and beating him more. Just one story.
We have a new report from Amnesty International about Saydnaya Prison, human slaughterhouse, they call it. 5,000 to 13,000 detainees hanged in mass hangings there. This would, on its face, be contrary to every aspect of international law.
Yeah.
What do you know about what's going on in that prison?
First of all, what the evidence? So this is first.
Is it true or not?
No, it's not true. Definitely not true.
How do you know? Do you know what goes on in that prison? Have you been there?
No, I haven't been. I've been in the presidential palace, not in the prison.
So here you have a very disturbing report about something going on in one of your prisons. Are you going to investigate?
So Amnesty International knows more about Syria than me, according to you. No, that's not true. No. They haven't been to Syria. They only base their reports on allegation. They can bring anyone, doesn't matter what's his title. You can forge anything these days. And we're living in a fake news era, as you know.
The Syrian exhibition at the Holocaust Museum features a number of images shot by a photographer codenamed Caesar. Caesar was a police photographer who escaped from Syria carrying 10,000 photographs taken between 2011 and 2013 on this flash drive. The photographs show the emaciated bodies of thousands of people who had been killed in prisons. The FBI's Digital Evidence Laboratory verified the authenticity of these photos in 2015 and said that the photos were not manipulated.
I was blown away when I saw them. I mean, you instantly think of the images, the horrific images from the Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust. That's the only thing you can compare these photos to. It was really important that more people see these photos, more people pay attention to them, and more people investigate how these photos came about and who was responsible for the horrific acts that you can see took place from those photos.
Who verified the pictures? Who they verified that they're not edited and photoshopped and so on?
You have said that the...
Do you have a photo?
I do have the photos.
Can you show it to me?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Here.
Okay. This photo, have you verified who are those? Cannot mention such a picture without verifying who are those and where and everything about it, just to put it in front of the audience, tell them, oh, they've been killed by the Syrian soldiers.
The woman who filed the lawsuit, the Syrian woman who filed the lawsuit, says she saw her brother in those photographs.
At the end, these are allegations. We have to talk about concrete evidence.
When Mansour and his friends decided to collect the names of their cellmates, they knew that if discovered, they could be sentenced to death. According to Syrian law, revealing the names of prisoners is regarded as espionage and endangering the security of the nation.
We had this thing we do in the detention. A group of 5 or 6 people gather together and they exchange the names and phone numbers of each other to memorize them. So in case one of them went out, they can talk to the family and contact them and tell them about the situation and where is their son or etc. But for me, it wasn't enough. Like, I memorized 5 or 6 names and what about the others? I wanted to document all the names, but the question is how? Of course, we didn't have anything, like no pens, no papers, everything was banned. Suddenly, one of us, he said, I have an idea. He stood up and he took a piece of plastic bag and went to the bathroom area. He came back with a red liquid inside it. It was blood he squeezed from his gum and spit it in that. Suddenly, we thought of mixing this blood with the rust from the steel bars in the ground. We mixed it and we also used that, and it was even better. Now was the last step on how to hide those shirt pieces. So I thought that we could hide them in the collar, inside the collar, but insert it and the cuffs of the shirt. We decided that the first one who will be called out will wear the shirt and contact the VDC, the Violation Documentation Center, which is the one I used to work for, to give them the names. It was me, I was the one who was called the first. And when I heard my name, I just jumped to the shirt. And that was like after maybe 20 days from when we finished that. And I wore the shirt and went out with the names. When I went out, I wasn't thinking of anything else, even my freedom. I was just obsessed with the thing that I have the names. what hurt me more that when I went out, I started to contact the families and telling them about their sons. And with all the work and evidence we have, we still got nothing. Those people who I left behind are still there.
After 5 years of carrying around the pieces of cloth, Mansour decided to lend them to the Holocaust Museum.
I thought to myself, we could at least help. If we couldn't do anything else but tell Mansour's story, we could help him preserve these cloths. We could help him so that in a generation or 2 generations from now, when people are denying that these crimes happened, when they're denying that he was held in detention, when the Assad regime continues to deny that these crimes are even being committed, he would have something for himself and for future generations to be able to say, we were detained.
It's an extraordinary act that he understood in his circumstance that it wasn't just about him, that there was something much larger at stake. So I think we will only continue to increasingly appreciate the significance of what Mansour did in the years and decades ahead.
Mansour's vision now is to create a museum and memorial for Syria inspired by the Holocaust Museum. The memorial will commemorate the victims of the Assad regime and other factions in Syria, groups such as the so-called Islamic State, whose distorted interpretation of Islam has led to the murder of tens of thousands of people.
When I visited it, it was one of the thoughts that came to my mind directly. I saw how good they are reserving those documents, and they built like the whole stories of what happened. I realized really that we are missing so much of work on what's going on in Syria. We need such centers. We need to remind people. At this point, not remind them, but tell them what is going on now. It's not only reminding them. We are just telling you that this is happening now.
Like most Syrians, Mansour was subjected to his government's Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. Cooperating with the Holocaust Museum, an institution dedicated to the memory of 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis and their collaborators, was a courageous decision.
When I was a kid, everything about Jews and Israel and was conspiracy and lies and propaganda. That's how the regime and school books and almost everybody, because it was a part of how the regime is controlling the Syrian people, trying, as we said, raising them on propaganda, false facts. So in general, the situation that everything is a lie, the Holocaust is a lie, it's denied.
That the Holocaust is a lie.
Yeah, of course, that it's only a propaganda by Jews so they can victimize themselves. But later, when I get other sources of information, start to talk about it with other people who works in human rights field, the closed networks, we started to know that no, not everything the regime says is right. That's when you start to think, of course. And from the movies also, I saw a lot of movies and Schindler's List and others.
I think one of the very special things that the museum has been able to do is have survivors tell their stories to people here in the museum, but all around the country, and to interact particularly with young people. And I really believe that telling these personal stories and passing them on to young generations is very important, not only to remember the lessons of the past, but to build social solidarity and make sure that these lessons are relevant to new generations. Because at some point, the survivors won't be here to tell the stories. And then we will count on museums like this one, but also these young people to carry this message forward.
Everybody was very scared, of course. Nobody ever told us where we're going.
So when we arrived in Auschwitz, we had no idea where we were. My mother and two little brothers were asked to go to one side, and they disappeared. And then I was holding a younger sister. I was 13 and she was about 12, and he separated the two of us. And I was so shocked that my little sister was separated from everybody that I stopped. I didn't move. I'm shown here, right here. The other prisoners who came before us, the first thing we asked them, when is the reunion? When do we meet our families? What's the system? And they pointed to the chimneys. The chimneys were smoking, and fire was coming out of chimneys, not just smoke. They said, that's where your parents are. And we just said, crazy people, what did they do to you here to say such things? We did not believe it. I, as a teenager still, I was fantasizing that it's not happening. They're somewhere. When it's over, we'll all go home. Stuff like that. You had to live. You had to. Another thing, after a while, I thought, well, nobody knows this is happening, and we'll have to live and tell them when we get out of here. It's very important to tell them,
To have a better understanding of the Holocaust, building memorials, and the importance of remembering victims, Mansour visited Berlin, Germany. The city was the seat of Nazi power during the Holocaust, but now it has one of the most important Holocaust memorials in the world.
As you want to build a museum, a memorial, I think in Germany you can say all of the memorials you now see start with individuals, small group of people, maybe 2 or 3, gathering support. So it really comes out of civil society, and it always goes against resistance, including resistance from the government historically, and only very late embraced by state authorities. None of this was there when I was growing up there. So it takes a long time to enter the consciousness and to work it through. So never be discouraged, because when you walk here through Berlin, and you have been to several memorials, it was a long fight to establish them.
Do you think it's made Germany a better country?
I think if Germany, because Germany is a post-genocidal society, and the only thing that saves a country that went and allowed genocide is to work through it. That's the only remedy to maybe not fall back into that pattern of genocidal violence. So it made Germany certainly a better country. I still feel there's lots of things that needs to be done, and it's an ongoing work from generation to generation. But I think to acknowledge this is the only safe way to escape that violence, that murder that happened in this country, because this country has been a killing field. And in order to build a life in it again, you need to address the killing field and the victims, and to remember the victims.
On our second day in Berlin, we went to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, which is now a museum visited by tens of thousands of people every year.
Sachsenhausen started to build up in summer 1936. At the same time, the Olympic Games were taking place in Berlin. The commander of all concentration camp commanders had his office here. So this really was the center of the terror system. 200,000 people were imprisoned between 1936 and 1945. First, of course, Germans, the political opposition, communists, social democrats, conservatives, men of the churches. Then also so-called anti-socials, homosexuals, and after the Reichskristallnacht, the night of broken glass, in November 1938, 6,000 Jews were sent to Sachsenhausen.
I'm a survivor, and I went through inhuman conditions and detention underground, and many things I see here reminds me of what I've been through. At the same time, I'm thinking of the value of keeping these sites for memory.
Material relics become important, more and more important, because they are the witnesses now. They show that the concentration camps really existed, that the crimes, the Holocaust really took place, because there are deniers, not only in Germany, but everywhere in the world, there are deniers. So we made great efforts to keep them for the future, to learn about the mechanisms, about the developments, about the motivation of the people, helps us to prevent that something like this happens again. At the moment, we have some 22,000 names of people who were killed here or died here. But we think that another 20,000 or even more were killed here. But the names we never will find out again.
Actually, maybe I didn't tell you, but I was detained by the government, and we were double the size, more than 70 people.
70?
Yeah, 70. 70.
Double the size of such a...
Double the size.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, and I spent there 9 months.
9 months?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That place, without going out even once.
Under the ground?
Under the ground.
Without
3
leaving.
floors. Now, in this situation underground, there are almost 60,000 people who are still in those conditions now, at this moment. The similar color, the same color that of the cell that I spent time in, same color.
Here you see the fundings of the other wings of the building, and the main entrance has been here. And here were the offices and interrogation rooms of the SS.
I just got back to where I was for a bit, and I saw my friends still there. And it was my first time to see the cell from outside, and I saw the door, and it was almost the same color. I wanted to talk while I was there, but I really couldn't. I was just like suffocated.
Since the start of the civil war in Syria, hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees have arrived in Germany. 80,000 of them chose Berlin as their new home. In 2015, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that Germans should be proud that so many refugees wanted to come to their country.
Deutschland ist ein starkes Land Und das Motiv, in dem wir an diese Dinge herangehen, muss sein, wir haben so vieles geschafft, wir schaffen das. Wir schaffen das und wo uns etwas im Wege steht, muss es überwunden werden, muss daran gearbeitet werden und der Bund wird alles in seiner Macht Stehende tun, zusammen mit den Ländern, zusammen mit den Kommunen, genau das durchzusetzen.
But this also led to some of the ugliest scenes in recent memory in Germany. Scenes that were reminiscent of one of the darkest chapters of modern history.
Und dass hier ganz viele Neonazis mitlaufen, ist Ihnen egal? Ja. Oder sind Sie auch einer? Bin ich rechts. Normaler Bürger. Keine Interviews. Keine Interviews. Tschüss. Dürfen das die Leute nicht? Keine Interviews.
Of course, despite many demonstrations and some attacks against refugees, millions of Germans welcomed these Syrians to their country. After the Second World War, the German Nobel Prize-winning author Heinrich Böll famously said, "We Germans must learn that resistance is not only possible and allowed in dictatorships. There is resistance that man must perform every day."
I would particularly want to thank our clients that...
Mansour and I discovered this German resistance to prejudice at a foundation named after Heinrich Böll, at an event called Towards Accountability for International Crimes in Syria.
Obtaining medical records like this was extremely difficult because medical staff, medics, were scared. Why? Because the regime was targeting medics. This is just one example where young medics, who were those who specifically looking after demonstrators who'd been shot, were arrested, tortured, killed, and their bodies were burned. Their identity cards were left next to their bodies.
Mansour's visit to Berlin was also an opportunity to meet some of his old friends and to learn more about his ordeal. One of the panelists was Mazen Darwish, Mansour's friend and colleague at the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression in Damascus. Mazen, his wife and colleague Yara, Mansour, and 11 other colleagues were arrested on the same day, on February 16, 2012.
Yara, what did you think when they came to the office?
Well,
were you prepared for a day like that?
Well, I would say you would think you're prepared, but still when it's happened, something different. You start to think about, did you get a good life? And what about if this was the end and stuff like this? As a pragmatic girl, I would say it was better than just someone shoot Mazen. What was shocking for me to arrest everyone. I was worried about how Mazen will deal with the idea because there's 5 women. One of our colleagues has 2 children, and he thinks a lot about this stuff. Like he's a big boss and he's responsible.
Mazen was soon taken to the 4th Division prison, the same jail to which Mansour had been transferred.
يعني هاي سادس مرة كنت بتوقف بسوريا، لكن هي أول مرة بتوقف بأماكن بمكان ما سجن بالمعنى النظامي أو فرع تحقيق بالمعنى النظامي. هذا سجن سري، هذا تابع لقطعة جيش، أول مرة بحياتي بمر بهذا الوضع. هذا مكان ما حدا بيعرف فيه. ممكن تقضي أنت هون 100 سنة ما في حدا بيعرف. 2 اللي يعني هنيك مثلا بالمزة يعني بتروح على التحقيق بترجع، هنيك اللي بينادوا عليه بياخدوا اسمه ما عاد بيرجع، بيختفي. فهذا وين راح؟ قتلوه، أطلقوا سراحه. كل هي المتناقضات، ومن انه واحد فعلا اخذوه اعدموه صفوه، لواحد هلا بعد شوي بتتخيلوا انه والله هو بعد ساعه رح يكون مثلا مع اهله.
Germans have not only commemorated the victims, but have also tried to identify the perpetrators and to understand the roles they played in past atrocities. Mansour visited the house of the Wannsee Conference on the outskirts of Berlin. On January 20th, 1942, the administrative leaders of various Nazi government departments gathered there to discuss the implementation of the final solution to the Jewish question.
What we have here are bureaucrats, administrators, people who come here not to do the actions, but to organize things, to implement that. And the topic of the meeting is the final solution of the Jewish question in Europe. And that meant for these men mass murder. In January 1942, it is already clear we're talking about how to murder 11 million Jews that live in Europe. And they don't do it, but they help organizing it from their desks. They do it, putting people in touch with logistics, deportations, when is which train going, from which of the countries to which of these death camps. Well, they talk about methods of killing. How do we murder people? So they know how to run an administration. The whole process of mass murder, and they're planning to murder 11 million Jews of Europe. And they state that in the protocol here very clearly.
Hearing words such as justice, accountability, and peace in Germany, a country that has gone through a genocide, gives hope to Syrians. But the sad reality is that the Assad regime is carrying out its carnage right now. During the conference, we were surrounded by Syrians who had recently fled their country and wanted to tell Mansour their stories.
ولا هل تعلم في فرع المزة قطعوا له واحد لا يجرب صاروخ الحجر قدامنا.
انا فتحوا لي رجلي باول يوم بالفرد اللي
بيخشوا فيها غرغرينا منهم مسك له قطع له وجهه في الصاروخ. عم يعالجوا يعني. عم بعالجه قطع له هي وانكوت وجابوا له عنا عادي. واللي عمل هيك ممرض ولا دكتور؟ لا هن المحققين نفسهم وسجانين.
At the time of his arrest in November 2011, Yazan Awad was a university student in Damascus. One day, during his imprisonment, he was taken to the torture room and his clothes were torn off before his interrogation.
المحقق يلا اشبحوا، قال له للعنصر اشبحوا. فطلعت وقفت على شغلة تقريبا ارتفاعها هيك. ايدي كانوا اصلا كلبشين لورا. ربطهم بحبلة يعني عريضة منيح، ربطهم. ولما عم يربطون يعني انا كان كل شوي انه عم ايدي عم تطلع وصار يشدها وانا ما عاد فيني ايدي، بس كانوا انه دائما هو شادد لي ايدي وحاطط هيك مشان يضلوا مشدودين ايدي ما ينتنوا. طلع هذا الشيء اللي اسمه شبح خلفي. انا ما كنت متصور اصلا شو هو شبح لحتى دغري اول مره انشبح يكون شبح خلفي، يعني مو مهيئ حالي نفسيا. شغله تانية لما كانوا عم يلعبوا في نطابه، ما كنت عم اتخيل غير ميسي ورونالدينيو، مو اللي عم يلعبوا في نطابه، كانوا ميسي ورونالدينيو عم يواسوني انه هدي هلا رح تخلص المباراه. يعني بعداك اليوم شفت سيدنا محمد وسيدنا عيسى وماريا وميسي ورونالدينيو وشفت ماما. كان يوم حافل. يعني ما في الا لحتى هو يرجع. بعدين قال لي فتحت امك، فما انا مطمش وصرت فاصل لوقتها اكثر من 10 مرات يعني، وما عاد حاسس لا بايدي ولا بجسمي. وحتى لما كنت اكل خبطات بعصاية الكريك على مهنتي ما يجي على صدري تجي على وشي، ما عاد فرقت معي. قال لي افتح تمك، فتحت، حط المسدس، قال لي تشهد. فأنا مخي ما عم مستوعب إنه هذا عن جد حاطط مسدس، عم يمزح. بعدين تشهد، ليش أنت بتعرف الله؟ قلت له شال المسدس، قلت له أشهد. قال لي تشهد مثل عالم الناس. طبعا ضليتني عم بحاول انا اسحب فيها بالوقت انه بركي ما بيقوصني. بصراحه انا كنت بهذيك اللحظه كنت متاكد انه راح يقوصني، لانه كانت الحده تبعيته كتير فظيعه، كل شيء كان عم يصير من الصبح كتير فظيع، فانا كنت متاكد 100% انه انا راح اتقوص. فكنت عم بحاول انه بهذيك الفترات هيك اتذكر شط حياتي. ضليتني عم بتشهد يمكن أكثر من دقيقتين، يعني بس الشهادة أخذت معي شي دقيقتين. أنا خلصتها فهو طق، فباللحظة اللي هو طق فيها كان قايل له للعنصر إنه طوش الخيط الحبل. فأنا خبطت بالأرض، فأنا طقة مع الخبطة كل فكري إنه أنا متت. بس إنه ما شفت عزرائيل، بس إنه أنا ميت. فقمت وقفت، وين جثتي؟ فجأة ما لقيت غير شي 4-5 طلعوا وبوكسات، شوطات، خبطات. شو عم تعمل يا حقير يا ابن الكلب؟ امك اختك ما خلوه. والخبط ما عم يوقف، هن كانوا 5 مجموعة، كانوا مع بعض 5. أنا هون عرفت إنه عايش. قلت يا ريتني لو متت. والله لو متت أرحم.
خلص حاجة افتحها.
How does it feel when you think about it and talk about it now?
Of course, it feels so bad.
Do you feel angry? Do you feel
I have
upset?
all the feelings. I feel angry, I feel depressed, I feel sad, I feel hopeless. I feel violated.
When you came to the Holocaust Museum, we felt that connection. We understood that your successful attempt to save names is the first step of remembering victims. But we've seen it in Rwanda, where people speak the names of the people they lost. We see it in Cambodia and many other circumstances where people were killed en masse and disappeared in their victimhood in a way. And the only thing that we can give them, those victims, is the dignity of being remembered.
I think one of the steps towards the aspiration of justice is just to acknowledge what happened, to remember the victims as individuals not as statistics, that is what the perpetrators would like, but to individuals like you and me, ordinary people. Another is to confront the truth of what happened and to do historical research and educate the public.
العدالة بالنسبة لي أبداً ما انتقام، ما عملية انتقام نهائياً يعني. لكن بالنسبة لي العدالة هي مستقبل سوريا. العدالة هي إمكانية السلام بسوريا. بدون ما يكون في عدالة، وبعرف ما عم بحكي عن عدالة بالمعنى الرومانسي، كل مجرم بده ينال عقابه بهذا الشكل اللي اليوم بسوريا أصبح مستحيل. لكن العدالة بحكي عن عدالة انتقالية متوازنة وذكية، بحيث تضمن إمكانية التعايش والتنوع والسلام بسوريا.
I truly cannot imagine that one day all my work and others' organizations' work and other activists' work will go in vain. The people who did it will not be held responsible. I don't believe in that. I'm sure one day will come and we'll feel some justice. Maybe I'm not seeing the results now. Maybe I don't see, but I believe that one day it will happen, and I cannot believe in anything else.